The average human brain contains about 100 billion neurons. Each of those is connected to up to 10,000 other neurons through synapses that can be in a variety of states ranging from excitatory to inhibitory. When neuroscientists crunch these numbers, they find that your brain can be in more possible mental states than there are elementary particles in the known universe. And yet, we make inferences about the minds of others almost as easily as we breathe, causing us to make inaccurate assumptions more often than we would guess. This creates a lot of misunderstanding in everyday social life. So what's the secret to understanding those around us?
What we find in our research is that a really critical cue for understanding the mind of another person is actually their voice. It's hard to see another person's mind. I can't see you thinking or feeling. I can't see a want. I can't touch an attitude. I can't hold a belief. A mind, as the ancient Greeks recognized, is ineffable. It's invisible. I can't see it directly in you. But what we find in our research is that you sometimes can hear it. That is, a person's voice contains a lot of information through language that conveys both the contents of what's on a person's mind, what they're actually thinking or feeling, as well as the very presence of another person's mind, the fact that they actually are thinking or feeling.
Chicago Booth's Nick Epley and several other researchers ran a study where they asked participants to describe a moment in their life where they made a decision that had an outcome that was positive or negative.
We're able to use the audiovisual, what you're seeing and hearing right now, so you could see and hear the person telling their story. We were able to take just the audio from that. You could just listen to what I'm saying to you now. And we also took a transcript of that, so we could get a text-based version of this. We also had them write this story to us. So this was a pure text-based story. So the participants in our experiment then watched, listened, read the transcript, or read the written report of this decision. And they simply rendered judgments about that person. And in particular, they rendered judgments about that person's mind. How thoughtful, how intelligent, how rational, how sophisticated is this person? And what we found was that the presence of a person's mind, how thoughtful and intelligent and rational this person seemed, was really carried on their voice, such that you judge the person to be more thoughtful and intelligent and rational when you heard what the person had to say, either audio, visual, or audio. Those two conditions didn't differ from each other, compared to when you read what the person had to say, when you read the transcript of what they had to say, or when you read their written description.
Just as most people don't consciously consider whether a voice is present when making a judgment about someone else, many of us don't recognize how the absence of our voice might affect the message we're sending. Epley ran another experiment where he had people come into the laboratory and communicate a thought about 10 different topics, either sincerely or sarcastically, using their voice or using email.
So you could talk about the weather in Chicago, right? And you could write a statement saying, the weather in Chicago is great. And you could mean it very sincerely. Or you could say, the weather in Chicago is great.
Then they brought in participants to act as message receivers, who either listened to the messages or read them. Receivers who heard the messages were significantly better at guessing whether they were sincere or sarcastic. But, just as importantly, those who communicated over email overestimated how easily the sincerity of their messages could be decoded. The same was not true of those who used their voice to communicate.
But that effect that seems somewhat obvious to us was not obvious to the people who are actually communicating those messages. That is, the senders, when they were communicating over email, thought that the recipient would be just as accurate, that is, would get just as many correct, as when they were communicating with their voice. In fact, over email, they were communicating at chance levels. The recipient was no better than chance at guessing whether your message was intended to be sincere or sarcastic. But as communicators, because you know what you're trying to communicate to somebody else, you know that that statement is meant to be sarcastic, it can seem like it's going to be more obvious to the recipient than it actually is. A person's voice contains a lot of cues. In many ways, it's the closest that you will ever come to the mind of another person through hearing their language. Language evolved, after all, to convey what's on my mind to you through words. But the voice on top of that semantic context also contains cues to the presence of a mind. But as a communicator, we find that people often neglect that. They don't seem to recognize how important the medium is for conveying accurately the message you're trying to convey to somebody else.